Hey, Justice here, and Hunters, at long last your time has finally come to take the spotlight. However, this is going to play out a little differently for you guys. This video is only going to cover 3 builds instead of the 5 like my previous videos for Titan and Warlock, but in my opinion this will provide more depth and detail, going over the more intricate parts that allow the build to flourish. We will be combing through the changes to weapons, armor and its mods, and the artifact for Edge of Fate, and we are going to do so as clearly and as concisely as possible to allow you, the viewer, an easier and better understanding for preparing yourself to meet the 9 and face the Conductor's forces. These builds have a beautiful synergy and chemistry behind them that anyone will enjoy, and they're all different subclasses. Unlike the Warlock and the 3 solar builds, that's my bad on that one. The best part is that these are already strong builds that are getting a hefty upgrade through the new stat system, which we'll go over in just a second. So for now, grab your Vex Milk, grab your Galadoodles, and get yourself comfortable as we walk through the 3 builds that I'll be using in Edge of Fate. The first build being showcased today is a Prismatic Hunter utilizing Bastion and the exotic class item with Spirit of Inmost and Spirit of Cyrtarachne. This build is an absolute monster with constant uptime for Invis, Radiant, Woven Mail, and Amplified, making you an incredibly agile fortress, a walking tank even. This build's goal was through collateral damage and some AoE damage, you could self-sustain efficiently while eradicating the smaller enemies, working through the larger ones as they came and eventually went. Our first priority is knowing what armor archetypes we're going to be chasing to make this build work. Alongside the Edge of Fate's release, Bungie is releasing 6 armor archetypes: Weapon, Health, Class, Grenade, Super, and Melee. These stats now up to 100 will increase your ability regen or health regen depending on what your focus is, and going up to 200 increases the actual damage of a lot of the stats, strengthening your Super, Grenade, Weapons, and Melee. These armor stats will be dropping in archetypes, focusing on a main stat, a secondary stat, and a random third stat. For a better understanding or view of this, I have a video on my channel about Ada1 and her new role with Edge of Fate. That'll also have a link appear on screen and in the description, so be sure to check that out. This first build is going to be prioritizing the Grenadier archetype, with Grenade as the main stat and Super as the second stat, and the Paragon archetype, with its stat choices being Super as the main stat and Melee as the secondary stat. Unfortunately, the class stat is in some rough archetypes that won't mesh with the stats we're looking for, those archetypes being Specialist, which focuses on class as its primary stat and has weapons as its secondary stat, and Bulwark, which has health as the primary stat and class as the secondary. You're better off using the mods in your armor to get the class stat up to a reasonable amount so it can regen a bit quicker, as the amplified uptime is going to greatly benefit the build. The main ingredient for this build is the exotic class item, only obtainable through completing the exotic mission Dual Destiny, which will reward you with a class exotic that rolls with 2 random exotic perks. You can focus a single perk at Ghost on the Pale Heart, and if you're unsure how to unlock the ability to run the Dual Destiny mission, I'll have an old short I made on how to unlock the mission on screen and linked in the description. Continuing from that, if you just need someone to run the mission with, I have a Discord community that I'm trying to grow that I'm sure will have someone to help you. Or if I'm available, you can catch me on twitch.tv/HeyJustice. Then I'll happily set some time aside to help you out. Anyway, enough with the self-advertisement for now, and let's get back to the video. Moving on to the weapons. The Velocity Baton from the Vesper's Host Dungeon is a free way for us to obtain an Orb of Power using the perk Attrition Orbs, as each splash of the Area Denial frame seems to stack on top of each other to speed up orb generation. Using these orbs allows us to regenerate our abilities faster and provide a little bit of healing with each orb picked up thanks to the Recuperation mod on our legs. This mod though is taking a hit to how much health it's regenerating, reducing from 70 to a measly 15, making the survivability game a little harder, but having the damage reduction from Woven Mail and Amplified should help in that area too. Our grenade choice for this build will be the Grapple Grenade, with its short cooldown and high mobility option, allowing us to be in the battle at a moment's notice. For your melee, it is personal preference, but my 2 choices change between the Snare Bomb and Threaded Spike. Snare Bomb was used to help assist Bastion in defeating champions with extreme speed, and also throwing the Snare Bomb procs 1/2 of Bastion's exotic perk, Saint's Fury, which is like its own trench barrel, where damaging with a melee enhances the next shot of Bastion. Firing your Bastion then leads into the second part of the perk, Saint's Fists, where hitting most of your pellets will then give your next melee extra damage. The perk is the equivalent of having the Trench Barrel and 1-2 punch perks combined, and boy does it do those 2 things very well. Threaded Spike with the stat changes should be an amazing choice now for near infinite cycling of throwing your melee at the enemies, as when the dart returns to you, it'll also refund melee energy for each target hit when you catch it by pressing your melee again. Having 100 melee is going to maximize your melee regen from all resources, including including the dart. Lastly, for dodge, you'll want to go with Gambler's Dodge to get your melee back instantaneously. You already get Radiant from Facet of Dawn, which is incredibly easy to proc, and you won't be needing to use your dodge to reload your weapons. So Gambler seems the most suited. For aspects, we are going to be locking in Stylish Executioner and Ascension. Stylish Executioner reads that final blows on a debuffed enemy grant the player invisibility and true sight for a short amount of time. This gives us a nice breather if we quickly apply a debuff on an enemy to stay in the combat, but not be targeted for a short time before resuming into the battle. Ascension reads that while airborne, consume your class ability energy to summon your Arc Star, propelling yourself upwards and creating a burst of energy around you that amplifies allies and jolts targets. Being amplified will also provide us with some extra damage reduction on top of the Woven Mail, making your life that much more worthy. Plus, Bungie gave Ascension a very good buff in that class ability mods will now work with it when they didn't before, like Dynamo on your helmet, which grants you super energy whenever you use your dodge around nearby enemies. Moving on to the fragments, we've got some excellent choices here. Facet of Courage is our first fragment choice, where Arc, Solar, and Void abilities do increase damage to enemies with Darkness debuffs. The Darkness debuffs you have available are Sever and Unravel from your Threaded Spike, and Grapple if you choose those abilities for your path. And you also have access to Slowing from your Transcendent Grenade. Tether isn't so much a damage dealer, but helps with your other abilities in defeating targets. The main one again being that Transcendent Grenade and Ascension with its constant jolting. The cherry on top for this fragment is that it provides plus 10 grenade stat, making it easier to hit your stat goals. For fragment number 2, we are going to be using Facet of Dawn, which reads as powered melee hits will make you radiant, while powered melee final blows will make you and your nearby allies radiant. Unfortunately, it does cost you 10 melee stat when you equip this fragment, but the reward and benefit of having a 15% damage buff and the ability to pierce barrier champion shields makes this so worthwhile to use. Moving to number 3, we have an absolute necessity in the name of Facet of Protection, where while you are surrounded by combatants, you become more resistant to incoming damage, and while you are transcendent, this effect increases. For how in your face this build is designed to be, you are desperately going to want this, as it can be a lifesaver when things get a little gritty, and it's just another layer of damage reduction. The final fragment will be Facet of Awakening, where rapidly defeating targets with light or darkness damage or super final blows generates an elemental pickup of the matching damage type. The elemental pickup in question will be Void Breaches, which when collected will grant us class ability energy, helping our Ascension regenerate that much more and allowing the continuous cycle of abilities. Lastly, as we approach the artifact, we have some good options, and then some that will just fill in the gap. The main ones we want to focus on are Tightly Woven, Elemental Daze, Coalescence, Overdrive, and Shield Crush. Firstly, with Tightly Woven, gaining Woven Mail will increase our class ability and grenade stat, strengthening the damage of our grenade if the stat exceeds 100, and giving us an Overshield if our class stat also exceeds 100. Although be warned, the Overshield is a 1-to-1 ratio of what exceeds 100. So if you have 101 class stat, then you will get a whopping 1 Overshield. This artifact is definitely more beneficial for our grenade stat, but giving the class stat a top up is handy to keep the ability cycles going for days on end. Elemental Daze is a nice one to add for champion content, as stunning a champion with an elemental weapon will cause an explosion matching your subclass to affect the target and nearby enemies with the matching debuff. This build already has 2 of the 3 ways to stun champions built in, Jolting Overloads with the Ascension aspect and Radiant being earned from Facet of Dawn, allowing us to stun barriers with everything but Bastion, as it is intrinsically unstoppable. Saying that, Bastion is the final champion stunner, bringing you in as the all-rounder for the team, the jack of all trades, the kid who was Cher's gum at school. Moving to Coalescence, defeating targets has the chance to create an elemental pickup matching your equipped super element, a small little aid to help gain back our dodge and use Ascension with it. This artifact helps enable Elemental Overdrive with more constant elemental pickups, and it grants your weapons a damage boost if you collect an elemental pickup or tangle that matches your weapons. We are going to be spawning a lot of Void Breaches and Tangles, so you'll easily be able to have your weapons benefit from the artifact. Last, and absolutely not the least, is Shield Crush. Shield Crush reads that while you have Woven Mail, Frost Armor, or a Void Overshield, your melee recharges faster and deals increased damage. And while you are Amplified or Radiant, your grenade recharges faster and deals increased damage. Seeing as we can very easily obtain Woven Mail, Amplified, and Radiant, our melee and grenade damage and regen will be greatly increased, and again mesh with the build to make it that much more fluent. I hope once all these pieces of Exodia are placed together and you create this build, you'll be able to slay out to your heart's content without even breaking a sweat. Our second build of the video has us approaching a more chill side of the fight, and that's using Mask of Fealty on Stasis. With the artifact giving Stasis another moment to shine, it was only fair to don the helmet again and create my own frozen fortress, shattering expectations and slowing everyone to a free... Yeah, I'm making a lot of Stasis references I'll move on. The leader of this expedition will be guided by none other than Mask of Fealty, with its ability to create stasis crystals with your melee, and shattering stasis crystals will then spawn more little mini shurikens. So the process being, you control the field of stasis crystals, and your melee shatters them, which causes more crystals to spawn, and in turn more shurikens, returning melee energy. A wonderful cycle of shuriken oblivion. For the armor, our main archetypes are going to be Gunner and Paragon, as we'll mainly be using our weapons and melee in this build. While the main focus is using your melee to create stasis crystals, and then use your second charge to detonate and spread them. If a melee misses or an attempt to spread winter fails, you'll need reliable backup to ensure you can recover from your definitely not missed shuriken. Pairing this with a headstone weapon is an absolute bag of fun when you look at the choice of weaponry you have with it, and can make the process that much easier and even more destructive. I haven't used it myself, but Wicked Implement is getting its buffs, and creating stasis shards could be the perfect companion for this build. The Wicked Implement buffs are that it now is a rapid fire frame, upping the fire rate to 260 RPM, increasing the mag size to 20, and making it intrinsically overload, with the only catch being that it now takes one additional shot to start slowing and freezing targets to account for the faster rate of fire. Other weapons of choice could be any stasis weapon that can obtain the perk Headstone. The Fair Judgment Auto Rifle is a seasonal ritual weapon you can obtain from the Monument to Lost Lights in the Legacy Gear section. I have been using a Judgment hand cannon from Ride of the Nine with Rhyme Stealer and Headstone, and that has been working wonders with the extra frost armor the weapon is providing me. Unfortunately, that event is gone now, but there are still good old and new weapons that follow along with the new tier system. Going over the tier system quickly, Bungie now has our armor and weapon drops tiered from 1 to 5, and making this as simple as possible to understand. For armor drops, the tiers will determine the stat total between 2 points, all the way up to tier 5, which will be guaranteed 75 total stat points minimum. Tier 3 upwards also adds an energy point to your total, making it 11 instead of 10, and tier 5 will grant you the ability to tune a particular stat that is selected via 3 lines next to that stat. This is sort of like the new Artifice, where you can give +5 to this stat at the expense of -5 to any other stat you choose, or you can give a little stat inflation to your 3 lowest stats. Exotics, however, until Bungie decides to push the upgrade button, has them dropping at tier level 2, which really is a shame. Hopefully in the future we can get some kick-ass upgrades. For weapons, your tier will determine what is enhanced. For tier 1, nothing, nada, zilch. Tier 2 will be enhanced perks. Tier 3 is double perks in both columns with them enhanced. Tier 4 is perks, barrels, and magazines. And tier 5 is everything, including origin traits and even the mods on the weapons. Just some new ones that can be obtained with the Rhyme Stealer Headstone combo are the Stasis Sidearm Foster's Decline, a Stasis machine gun called Ulterior Observation, and a Stasis auto rifle from the new raid called Intercalary. All of these can drop higher tiers to increase the prominence of your weapons. However, the Desert Perpetual weapons will only drop at tier 5 if you do a 5 feet run of the standard mode, or alongside the epic version of the raid that has just arrived. Any weapons that also have Pugilist, or if you're that desperate for melee energy / damage, you can always slap on Monte Carlo. Although then you can be missing out on using the perfect exotic for this nonsense, and that is Salvation's Grip. That's right, one of the best exotics in the game just got even better, with its charge shot creating an abundance of crystals for you to aim at and make shattering all that much easier. Be wary though, the tracking on the shurikens is very questionable. It will prioritize the enemy instead of the crystals, which I wish there was some way to have that worked on with this helmet. Your energy weapon is entirely your choice. It very well could be the Pugilist weapon on a special weapon, just being mindful of its ammo. If you're feeling extra, you can use the new Spreadshot hand cannon, the Phonutria Fera. This new hand cannon also has a new perk introduced called Proximity Power, where final blows within 15 meters grant a stack of this perk for 10 seconds, and each stack grants 15 melee stat. This is beneficial if your armor stats are unable to hit that 200 and you need a little boost. For heavy weapons, I suggested earlier the Ulterior Observation if you don't plan on using Salvation's Grip. If you acquired a chill inhibitor from the Vesper's Host dungeon, then you can use that for a more damage front and return to your primary weapon for crystal synergy. For aspects, we'll be using Grim Harvest and Touch of Winter. Grim Harvest reads that defeating slowed or frozen combatants creates stasis shards and grant melee energy when picked up by you or your allies. And Touch of Winter enhances our stasis grenades with extra functionality. The 2 grenades we'll mainly be looking at are Glacier Grenade, which gains the added effect of adding a stasis crystal and changing the formation, or Duskfield Grenade, which increases the size of the slow field and adds a small stasis crystal in the center. Duskfield Grenade is the one I mainly use, as the added slow is very helpful in tense situations, although we won't get as many stasis shards from the Glacier Grenade to recharge our melee quickly, so the choice in the end can be yours. For our fragments, there are some specific choices we'll focus on, starting off with Whisper of Refraction, where defeating slowed or frozen targets grants you class ability energy, helping us regenerate our Gambler's Dodge much quicker and gaining gaining even more energy from that if we dodge near enemies. Our second fragment is Whisper of Conduction, which causes the stasis shards we create to track to our position, making it easier to collect them for our melee generation. It also gives us a nice little plus 10 to our health and super stat. Health isn't too much to admire, but the extra super stat will help us with how much super energy we receive. Fragment number 3 is Whisper of Durance. Durance will increase the duration of our slowing effects on targets when we apply it, also benefiting abilities that have a lingering effect. This fragment also gives us a nice plus 10 melee stat on top if you're just shy of hitting the 200 mark. Not that you have to be that high. The Withering Blade melee and Duskfield Grenade are both ways to apply slows, so this works nicely with them. Fragment number 4, we have Whisper of Chains, which has a chance of creating a stasis shard for us when we defeat enemies while Frost Armor is active, allowing us even more ways to generate melee energy, and this one fragment has a plus 10 to class stat for gamblers. The last fragment is Whisper of Fissures, which is going to complete the build nicely as it will increase the damage and size of the burst of stasis when we destroy a crystal or frozen target, and we are going to be having plenty of crystals to shadow my stasis hunters. Lastly, as we delve through the artifact, stasis has been given some more love alongside Edge of Fate. Now, of course, your weapons could benefit from any of the anti-champion perks again, depending on your weapon choice for this build, but we want to focus on the other artifacts, beginning with One with Frost. This artifact perk tells us that while Frost Armor is active, stasis weapons gain increased reload speed and stability, while swords gain increased guard resistance. Fever and Chill is going to be the next artifact choice that has two benefits to it, which is rapid precision hits with solar weapons grant Radiant, and stasis precision hits grant Frost Armor. The Frost Armor is going to help our survivability and quickly increase the stacks of the buff for longevity and sturdiness. Frost Renewal takes those stacks that we just gained, and when we take critical damage, it releases a burst that freezes nearby combatants and grants more Frost Armor to not just yourself, but nearby allies, potentially saving you from the grip of death. A lot of the other artifacts will be the same as the previous build, focusing our attention towards the trinity of Elemental Coalescence, Daze, and Overdrive, and your final selection again being Shield Crush. You can, however, switch Overdrive or Shield Crush for Frigid Glare, which is while you have Frost Armor, Stasis Precision Final Blows cause combatants to release a freezing burst. This would be an excellent choice for those who want their weapons to still have a bit of pip in their step, besides being crystal printers. This build is an excellent crowd control snow machine, and hopefully will shatter your expectations.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Our third build to present today is going to continue on the dark side of the subclasses with a twist of green. This build will be focusing on the exotic weapon, the Barrow Dyad, and the exotic helmet, the Cyrtarachne Facade, with our goal of the build to be dominating the battlefield with an almost infinite uptime of Woven Mail, Redlings, and rapid fast super regen. The Barrow Dyad was introduced in Heresy with an exotic mission, allowing you to acquire this spinning wheel monstrosity. However, as of right now, there is no way to obtain this exotic, so one of the core parts of the build is kind of in shambles now, which is lovely. But anyway, for those of you who do have the exotic, I'll continue on. This weapon is a craftable exotic with a good selection of perks to choose from, and a trait that you can decide to also pivot your focus on what you prefer. The traits being Taken Resolve or Taken Ambition. But before we talk about those, we need to talk about the intrinsic trait first, as this is what will be the main factor for your decision. It reads that this weapon generates blight as it deals damage. While not firing, blight depletes and gradually reloads the magazine. If you reload the weapon, it converts the stored blight into blight seekers. These blight seekers are like the Taken version of micro missiles, similar to the weapon Quicksilver Storm, but triggered differently. Moving back to the traits, Taken Resolve increases the rate you generate blight when you hit different targets, while Ambition increases the blight generated the more you hit the same target. In lower level content with weaker enemies, you'd want to go down the path of Resolve, and then for your higher content and more difficult enemies / bosses, Ambition will benefit the weapon more. Lastly, when looking at this weapon, you'll want to decide what perks work the best with your trait selection. These perks are High Impact Reserve, One for All, Hatchling, and Target Lock. All of these have a benefit and synergy towards Taken Resolve in my opinion, but One for All and Hatchling benefit the most from Taken Resolve. On our Hunter build specifically, we have the Ambition trait with Hatchling, as the artifact complements Strand heavily and also supports debuffing enemies, while still having Ambition to rack up those Blight Seekers on the tougher enemies. Cyrtarachne's Facade is a strong exotic choice for Strand, which reads that activating Grapple grants Woven Mail. While active, Woven Mail provides flinch resistance and now health when defeating targets. This exotic got a nice little quality of life update with defeating enemies now granting health, and while it's not a large amount, it's still a good amount to keep the ball rolling, or the tangles spinning, which will make sense once we start talking about the aspects for this build. Moving into the aspect region for this build, we will be using Widow's Silk and Whirling Maelstrom. Both of these are a must in the build as they complement the build so much more than the other aspect. Widow's Silk allows us to have an additional grenade charge, and if we're using Grapple, which we will be in this build, it then creates a grapple point for us. With this grapple point, it makes it even easier to rock and refresh your woven mail from Cyrtarachne. These grapple points also help us to utilize our grenade stat, because we're not just using it for the woven mail reset, but also the damage output, being able to spam grapple melees on surrounding enemies and live our Spider-Man dreams to the fullest. Whirling Maelstrom is our other selection, where destroying a tangle will essentially create our own Beyblade, violently spinning and seeking out targets, and emitting unraveling projectiles upon defeating enemies. These can also be used as a grapple point for your continuous and repetitive grapple melees, which is going to help out tremendously in the heat of battle. Now that we have those core items set up, let's talk fragments. Fragment 1 in our build is Transmutation. While you have woven mail, weapon final blows create a tangle, a beautiful little support from the side to help us with creating strong grapple points to keep our woven mail up and to spawn more whirling maelstroms. Fragment 2, we have chosen Warding. Picking up an orb of power grants woven mail. Even with our exotic helmet, you can never be too safe about making sure you always have woven mail on the ready, so a safe and sturdy choice. Fragment number 3 is going to be Ascent, where activating your grenade ability reloads your equipped weapons and grants bonus airborne effectiveness and handling for a short duration. This also provides us a nice little +10 to weapons, which is very complementary to the build. Even going beyond that, our grapple ability is going to be used quite regularly, and the free reload can help out greatly, especially when you have to reload in a pinch. Our fourth and final fragment is Propagation. Powered melee final blows grant your strand weapons unraveling. This permeates the target with strand matter, and as you deal continuous damage to the target, they will create unravel projectiles that will seek out other nearby targets. It also provides strand weapons with anti-barrier rounds, although those won't be effective on the Varrodyad as it will have the overload effect due to the artifact perk Overload Rapid Fire. It's still a strong fragment for this build. Closing this build off with artifacts, we have a strong choice of artifact perks to enhance this strand build and push it above and beyond. Starting off with the basics, Overload Rapid Fire strengthens our Varrodyad with Overload Champion capabilities, also overcharging the weapon when we enter certain activities, giving it a damage boost. Tightly Woven is going to be an excellent choice for this build, with us consistently being able to buff ourselves with woven mail. Our first new artifact choice is going to be Threadling Proliferation, which reads that dealing strand weapon damage has the chance to spawn a Threadling. Defeating a strand debuff target increases this chance. While we're not working directly with Threadlings here, it's always good to have another source of strand damage. Refreshed Threads is a nice strand support artifact perk, where picking up an elemental pickup matching your subclass element, or Tangle while you have a strand super, grants energy to your least charged ability. With how many tangles will be spawning, it will be a nice kickstart to regenerating our abilities to use them with the aid of spawning more tangles. All of our abilities are pretty important despite this being a weapon-based loadout. We still have to show some love to the abilities, as they are the true heroes without capes here. Threaded Blast is when you destroy a tangle with strand damage, it will increase the radius of the explosion and its damage. And who doesn't love explosions? Varro and the Threaded Spike melee are easy ways to have this artifact perk activate, controlling the battlefield further and watching the enemies unravel before your very eyes. Elemental Daze and Coalescence are selected again. In this final column, you have 3 good choices, 2 of them being previously picked, Shield Crush and Elemental Overdrive, but the third one, which to me is a must for the strand feel, is Tangled Web. Creating a tangle by defeating a strand debuff target suspends nearby combatants. This is such an easy perk to implement into the build, as grapple melees unravel a target and your Threaded Spike severs them. Already 2 super easy buff applications that you'll be spawning the tangles with ease and suspending your enemies. These are the artifacts that I would choose to be the method for your madness. And with that final build, we conclude this video. I hope you enjoyed this one being a bit more in-depth. I was worried I wasn't providing enough information or assistance with my previous videos, so I wanted to make this one a bit more thorough, which in turn, of course, made it lengthier, which is just the curl of the monkey's paw. The last 2 scripts for their videos were around the 2500 mark, and this one managed to hit over 6500 with just 3. I apologize for the wait on this video. I know I was supposed to do a Did I Cook series by now, but with family stuff and our little man, he really has been the conductor of our time and how much we can do. So whenever we could finally get him to rest, all that was on our minds was just rest, which is something I have to work on, and we'll discuss in a little video idea that I have, so stay tuned. Let me know if you want more bulk videos or if you just want them as single videos. I like the idea of devoting a lot of time to one build for a video and letting it shine, with maybe the odd clump video towards an expansion release, for example. With all that yammering said and done, thank you again for watching this video. I appreciate you all greatly, and I'll see you guys in the next video.